do we have here? A Conklin 1898. Someone did some Black Friday shopping. Nice. I don't know if this is... I'm assuming this is Naugahyde. And... This is supposed to be the green one. Conklin 1898 Misto Green with medium nib. I thought I ordered broad, but maybe I ordered medium. I don't know. That is a nice looking pen, huh? Alright, let's see what else is in here. Some paper and some ink. The ink. I wonder how many years it will go forgotten in this case. Will it dry up before I ever open that case again? I actually bought this from Pen Chalet. Pen Chalet, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Alright, let's open this up. I feel like I don't have enough light in here today. So I think this is a number 6 nib. I think I can replace this with a Joa nib, which I might do to grind. It is a small converter, which suits me just fine. Small converter means I get to swap out my pen more frequently. Use it, drain it, clean it out, replace it with the next one in line. These are last week's pens. Alright, today we're going to use some ancient copper. Why ancient copper? Because why not? I am not one who has any particular feeling about pairing ink color with pen. That is not me. If that is what you do, hey, you know, good for you. The closest I ever came was accidentally using a green ink with a blue pen. Let's clean this section off. We'll clean the bottle. Oh, look at that. I actually remembered to do that. Let's get this turkey reassembled. Anyone else super excited to see how well this writes? My super fancy 98-cent notebook. Great. Let's put these glasses on my face. Someone emailed me the other day, why don't you ever post your pens? I guess that posts. I don't know. Friends don't let friends post pens. Why? Because of reasons. Alright, well, here we are. Freeze, copper. This is a nice smooth pen. Wet. You know, I have tried working on my handwriting. This chicken scratch is the product of many hours of investment. I have very poor penmanship despite my best efforts. And I know what you're probably thinking. Well, maybe I just haven't tried hard enough. And, you know, maybe you're right. But that's okay, because ultimately, it doesn't matter. I am some stranger on the internet. My handwriting is irrelevant. This is actually, it feels nice. It looks nice. I like the swirl of colors in it. Should we call it melted crayon? Let's call it melted crayon look. It looks like melted crayon. It looks kind of like some of those super close-ups of the clouds on Jupiter. Maybe Jupiter would be a hair more orange. Whatever. Anyway, I bought this on Black Friday. It was my only Black Friday purchase, and I actually bought it on Cyber Monday. After debating buying it for days on end. By days on end, I mean 2 days. And normally I don't spend much money on pens. Mahjong P136, Mahjong P140, Hongdian 100, another P136. These I think I paid $22 each for, which is relatively a lot. This I paid maybe $17 for, which is still, you know, 40. This is a Monteverde Mountains of the World, whatever they call the blue one, with a, if I'm not mistaken, a stub nib. With a stub nib. And this one was also a little bit more expensive, but this Conklin was like $90-something. And is not the most expensive pen that I own, but it's certainly the most expensive pen that I've purchased recently. Because I've been caught up in Nibvana. So what is Nibvana? It's kind of like Nirvana, but for nibs. And experimenting heavily with modifying nibs to get the writing experience that I want. And as a result, I have not paid much attention to the actual pen itself, because as long as your form factor is there, this frankly feels as good as this for less than half the price. So long as the writing experience is there and the pen is comfortable to hold, you know, whatever. I personally believe you could take a good nib, stick it in a potato, and have a good writing experience. Because it all comes down to how that nib interacts with the paper. And yeah, ink has some role in there. But if the experience of the nib being drug across the paper is not smooth, is not well polished or whatever, then even your fancy pen is not going to write well. And as a result, I've taken pens like a bunch of Jinhaos that are currently out of reach. Yes, currently out of reach. And some Mahjons and some Hongdians. Actually, does this Hongdian have a custom nib? And I have ground the nibs. Yes, I have ground the nibs and polished them and wound up with a writing experience more in line with what I want. And this, for example, is a slightly oblique stub nib that I ground out of this Hongdian nib. And there's no ink in this, but amazing writing experience and learning to grind the nib myself to match how I hold a pen. It has been a remarkable hobby, experience, learning experience, whatever. Point is, I can take a mediocre nib and turn it into a phenomenal nib. Meanwhile, my mediocre nibs that come on some other pens that I have owned, I'm looking at you, Lammy, have not been the most suitable for customizing and have left me bitterly disappointed. One of the other advantages of relatively cheap nibs, inexpensive nibs, is if you're only learning how to do nib modification, the barrier for entry is lower, both in terms of the cost and in terms of your willingness to potentially modify your fancy pen's nib. So I can take a bunch of nibs that I paid $3, $4, $5 each for by buying them in bulk and throw half of them out while learning to grind some kind of oblique nib or stub nib or architect nib or whatever, or altering the nib into a fude nib. If it doesn't work out, no big deal. But if I were to go to one of my Mont Blanc pens with its gold nib and even consider to modify that, well, then I would know that I've gone too far. Because something like that, by modifying something like that, I would feel like I am perhaps going down a rabbit hole that is best left unexplored. Because if I screw up that Mont Blanc nib, if I sneeze while grinding away at it with an angle grinder, which I do not actually do, please don't actually believe I do that, replacing that nib would be costly. So that's part of the appeal for this. I can get replacement nibs for this pen relatively inexpensively, which means that I can actually get the entire section assembled, and I can swap it out, and I can just stick in a custom architect nib or an oblique stub or whatever. And it only takes a second or two to swap that out. And by second or two, I mean less than a minute. It's inconsequential. It is easy peasy. So that was part of my interest with this. And also I'm kind of like a crow. It looked kind of shiny and fun and swirly, and so I spent a lot of money, relatively speaking, on a pen that I technically did not need. But, you know, it brings me joy. It sparks joy, as they say. If I can learn to write. So anyway, Didn't buy anything else on Black Friday, I don't think. Filament. That's about it. And I've been thinking a lot, actually, uh, about how Black Friday has changed just in my lifetime. And how it became a national kind of event in my lifetime, and how we watched it grow from being just Black Friday to being, what, Peak Week, I think they call it. There's Black Friday, there's, what, Cyber Monday, there's, what were they calling the Saturday Small Biz? Saturday. They were opening stores on Thanksgiving. Do you remember that? Did they stop that? So where I live, not far from here, I guess it was about 15 years ago, Black Friday shoppers on Thanksgiving night stampeded a man to death trying to get their low-cost, poorly made televisions at a big box store. And at that point, I pretty much completely disengaged from a lot of that nonsense. Because if crowds of people can trample a man to death trying to get their crappy Vizio TVs, or whatever they were, then maybe I don't need to be a part of that. And not that I was ever one to go to these stores on these particular days, but generally speaking, with the exception of this pen, I have not even purchased anything on Black Friday in over a decade. And that's that. But sometimes, sometimes you give in, you deviate from your normal behaviors, and you wind up with a Conklin 1898 with a swirly, I don't know, is this a resin, plastic, whatever, barrel, and a number 6 nib. And look at how wet that is. That's amazing. I just love this ink. And sometimes when you do that, you're better off for it. And I think, even though this has a boring medium nib, that this medium nib is going to stay a medium. And I'm going to enjoy the hell out of this pen. And anyway, that's enough of my rambling. It's December. Go spend time with your families. Drink eggnog. Whatever it is you do. Stay in school. Stay off the streets. Whatever. Look at that. Look at how it just lays down that ink. Alright. Bye, everyone.